Baby Beard Media presents a roll-to-cast RPG podcast in the world of Vampire the Masquerade, starring Ellen Graham as Isabelle Dumont, Sean Flurl as Kevin Morse, and Phil Harker-Smith as Professor Vincent Masters. Story, storytelling, and additional rules by Christopher Bond. Design by Jack Sumner. Music by Paul Goodman. This is Adelaide by Night. Good evening and welcome to Roll to Cast's Vampire the Masquerade game, Episode 0. Episode 0 is an opportunity for listeners and players to get to know the world, to communicate to each other what the game is about and what they want to get out of it. It's a way for stories to blend and merge. It's a way for each of us to feel comfortable in playing the game and for listeners to understand who's talking to you, what they're playing, and what's going on in a lot of sense.
Also, welcome to Season 2.
Oh, yeah, welcome to Season 2.
Yay!
Baby Beard Media's Roll to Cast podcast.
I tried to make like a pop the champagne thing, but I'm wearing false nails at the moment, so I just clawed the inside of my cheek.
That was my pop sound.
That was a good sound.
I'm no longer your DM/referee.
No, you got fired.
A mantle is being handed over to the sultry tones that you heard first.
Sultry, thank you.
Sultry.
Yes.
Salty.
Oh, yeah. Sultry.
Introduce yourself.
Yes. Hello, my name is Chris Bond. I'm the storyteller for this season's game, Vampire the Masquerade. I'm
Let's
joined.
do last names this time.
Yeah, why not?
I
We've
think
done
we did
them
it
already.
on.
We've outed ourselves.
Yeah, it's been a few times that I've had my last name thrown around, so that's fine.
It feels more formal for
Yeah,
Vampire.
absolutely.
You know?
Speaking of Phil,
Yes, I'm joined by Phil.
Yes, Phil Harker-Smith. Yes, and I am playing a fellow named Vincent Masters, or Professor Vincent Masters,
To you.
of Clan Tremere.
Sean, hi.
I am Sean Flurl. That was a weird... Yeah. I'm Sean Flurl.
You look at your like hand, and Flurl is
my greeting?
smudged, so
Yes.
you're just like,
Feel.
Sean Feel.
Sean Flyvel, which I have been called Flyvel before. Anyway, I'm playing from Clan Bruja, or Bruja.
What is your character's name?
His name is Kevin Morse. Big Kev.
Big Kev, Kevin Morse.
Kevy.
And Ellen, hi.
My name is Ellen Graham, and I am playing as Isabelle Dumont of Clan Toreador. And
She's French.
She
French
is
sounding.
very en français. So have fun with that, B.
So I think, Phil, do you have a character accent at all?
It's him.
No, it's just
He
me.
does. He's
This
been putting
should
on a
be-
British accent.
That's right.
Smarmy.
You actually do have an Australian accent, not a British accent in real
In real life, yes.
That's right.
I have a bit of a hybrid that has skewed Australian in recent years. I was planning to use... He's quite a lot like myself in a way in terms of education and background. I see having a voice that is maybe a little bit more smooth than mine, and I plan on maybe characterizing more through body language at the table to kind of convey when I'm in and out of character.
Perfect for
Sean,
a podcast.
Yes,
you
it's
have
at home.
Sean, you've got a voice for your character?
I don't know what you're talking about, mate.
Oh my goodness. There he is.
That's what, he's Big Kev. He's don't call him Big Kev though, that's too informal. But yeah, no, he's just a larrikin.
Regular Kev.
Yeah, just a regular Kev. And this
Medium
is the
Kev.
voice that sits very close to where my voice wants to sit, so I thought let's just sit it here.
Okay.
So if you are, and by the way, like there are so many American shows that when they hear a really thick Australian accent, they subtitle it. So for our American listeners, good luck with this one, mate.
We've subtitled a podcast.
All
We'll
that
get it.
lingo going to be slung your way.
Transcript happening.
Yeah, we'll have to do a transcript for each episode.
And
yeah.
Ellen.
Yes, so it's a French accent, so a bit lilting, a bit considered. English is not first
How you say language?
It's quite Parisian.
It's very relaxed, you know. They like to do things at their own kind of pace, and also it adds to this kind of ethereal charm about her that, you know, quite often she'll kind of have to like cock her head to the side and people think, oh, she must be very interesting. Look at all that thinking she's doing. Really, she's just like, What is this word?
So basically, if you don't understand what we're saying, Phil's talking.
Cannot
Yeah.
remember.
No, that's fine. And Ellen, you're playing a Toreador, is that right?
A toreador.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oui.
So it's worth addressing kind of as the first thing. You three haven't played much Vampire the Masquerade, have you?
Not much.
Other
Not
than the
much.
demo game that we've already recorded for this, that's all I've been experienced.
I have played games set in the world of darkness, so I've played a bit of Mage and a bit of Changeling,
Great.
but not much of those either. But
Well-
yeah, no, I've never stepped into the shoes of a vampire before.
For those who
Full
haven't
of blood.
listened to... yes, it's a bloody world.
Squelch.
For those who haven't listened to episode 0 of our Cyberpunk series,
Yes.
why don't we discuss a bit about our role-playing experience? Phil, why don't you go first?
Sure. I came to role-playing as an adult. I got a D&D group, joined one at a shop, and thought this DM sucks. There's no imagination and description. Instantly inspired me to learn and get into DMing myself. So I haven't really looked back. Love DMing. I'm currently running a great D&D group at the moment.
I guess.
Sean's
he's doing-
in
he's
that
doing
group.
great. He's doing great.
Thank you, Sean.
He's
Thank
not
you.
just pissing all over.
if he doesn't say that, he gets hit by rock trap next game. So,
Appropriate response.
and I'm really interested in lots of different systems. So, as I said, I've played a little bit of the World of Darkness games, of which there are many. I also have played and run Dark Heresy. I've played a little bit of what's the anime game called? Help me out.
Exalted?
Yeah, and various other things. I'm really interested in systems and how they work and how they convey different kinds of worlds and tell different kinds of stories. So yeah, I'm quickly discovering in my adult life that role playing is actually a really deep passion of mine.
Has anyone else kind of discovered this, where at least I have, where the more I've gotten into role-playing games over the last year or so, the less I'm playing video games. It's become a replacement for me because I'm using the imagination rather than the screen. No, I just realized maybe that's just me noticing I haven't played video games
So
in
the
a while.
possibilities are quite a bit more. You've got more to play with when it's just kind of a DM having to go, all right, I'll figure that in somehow, as opposed to a video game that someone spent a lot of time on and gone. There's only so many variables that we can actually deal with before we break the.
We were actually I was talking with Chris before about, hey, how about we just start the game when we get tickets and just go to a different state entirely? Like, you're okay with that, right?
Yes, take your vampire characters, take them entirely away from the setting that I've spent a couple of months working on.
DMs love that.
That's great. Thank you.
And after
Deliberately decide not to engage with the
Then it
narrative.
becomes Final Destination, and
Yes.
Death starts hunting them down.
Especially after you followed the railway tracks I laid out for you so nicely during Cyberpunk. I feel like it would be a little bit unfair for us to then turn around to Chris and be like, yeah, we all get on a plane. We're going to South America.
That's right.
This is
We walk out into the sun just to experiment with what happens.
It becomes the Mummy Returns. Have you where you just
The
Brendan
sun
just keeps
chasing
running
you.
from the
Yes,
sun?
That's right.
a
Sean,
deep
what
cut.
about
right?
what about you? What's your experience with role-playing games?
So the most recent experience is season 1. But previous to that is, so as Phil so aptly mentioned, I'm currently embroiled in a D&D campaign. But other than that, my last 3 encounters, as I mentioned last episode 0, have been with Chris as a DM 3 times where it never went past the first session.
We hope to change
That
that.
bad?
So yeah, I'm fairly new in I guess in the grand scheme of things. Like I'm 28. And I've actually was just thinking last week, like, why the fuck didn't I find role playing sooner?
Yeah, I feel this way as well, yeah.
I would have really dug this as a 16-year-old.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things. It's kind of hard to get in if you're not already in, because it can be quite daunting.
Yeah,
going
for sure.
I didn't know anyone that played.
Yeah, and also you need to have other people who you don't want to just have a whole bunch of virgins like. I meant like game.
You're going to get that. I'm sorry, Ellen.
I meant
We've
role.
just lost so many listeners.
I meant role-playing virgins.
Yeah.
You know what
for
I
sure.
mean?
Because then everyone is too scared to dip their toe in the water.
Exactly.
Right?
You need someone who's experienced enough to run the game, and probably a few other to show you the ropes. And so you kind of have to wiggle yourself into some kind of already established groups, and it can be quite daunting.
I've only just discovered how to really devour the books, like a core rule book for myself, and I will spend hours at work when there's no one in. I will read the book aloud.
Sean's manager, don't listen to this.
No, don't look at the cameras. It looks like I'm giving a presentation, because if I can portray the meaning of the book to an audience, then I will understand it myself. But I've read pretty much the entire, like, as much of the Vamp rule book as I'm allowed to being the key word there. Allowed.
Yes, allowed.
That's how I learn, and that's how it's actually stuck now. Previous, like, because it's a 500-page book.
It's a tome.
And I got to it and I was like, oh, how do I do this?
Yes.
And yeah.
I mean, I think it's worth noting, like, as we approach it from a grown-up standpoint, that if you haven't got a taste for it and you do get in, it's extremely addictive. There really isn't any activity that scratches that same kind of center of your brain, I think. And so when you start getting a taste for, like, how you can get in, a taste for
vampire. Mouse you.
Bringing it
Wait,
back.
no, that's wrong.
It tastes for,
get
like,
it.
getting into the rule books. You can really, like, lose yourself in there, and you hear about people, especially people who DM, and you talk about working on the setting for months. People get so into their campaigns and their worlds and stuff. It's really consuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Phil has
it really can
made, Chris has made 50 NPCs for this game.
What?
It was like 50, wasn't it?
It's about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I made like 5.
I'm sure I will invent more as the game goes on.
I invented a few. A few of my favorite people from last season were completely made up, like Bones.
I liked Bones.
Bones is
Trying
great.
to
He was
bit of that
completely.
ultra-violence.
He was just because you wanted him. I was like, I have to make him up now.
I'm just going to lay this seed here. I want to see Larry again.
Let's. What do we hear from
Oh,
Ellen?
yeah. My
Ellen,
experience.
what about your experience?
So, yes, see previously on Baby Bird Media at
Hello.
Cyberpunk 2020. I'm also kind of somewhat intermittently in a D&D 5th edition campaign. That was kind of my first ever foray into proper role-playing. So I picked a kind of half-orc who's basically, as I call her, Nicki Minaj, the half-orc. She's a big, dumb...
Jesus.
No, I'm not saying Nicki Minaj is a big, dumb slut.
but just that image
but
is
like
great.
Nicki Minaj's persona, where it's like, I want to fuck, I'm hard as fuck, and what are we doing here? Like, can I smash it or can I fuck it? Those are my two options. And so she's...
can I smash it?
Oh, yeah, that's even better.
Yeah,
she wouldn't
right.
have thought of that. But like...
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. But like, basically a really easy kind of in for me because I don't need to think too much about strategy because it's just kind of like she's a kind of person who's just like, I try killing it or I want to try and fuck it. And so everyone has to kind of scramble around my poor decisions.
Every group needs one.
Yeah, and she's fun.
Last
Who's
season
it
we
going
had
to
me.
be?
Yeah.
Who's it going to be this time?
Can I ask, have you ever felt a desire to DM
DM?
or run a game?
Possibly. I do like getting really entrenched in lore. I think I had an idea about maybe doing something in terms of like Star Wars, like Rebels, because that's the thing that when I just think about all these stories of like when I was a kid, like what would all my role playing be? Like, you know, I'd be running around pretending to be part of the rebellion and like, you know, like a fighter pilot or all that kind of stuff or on the ground. And yeah, I've been thinking about possibly something Star Wars or possibly something Dragon Age because I fucking love Dragon Age,
Well,
you
that kind of,
guys.
your eyes completely lit up when I told you that a Star Wars role-playing game exists.
There's quite a few.
Yeah. Doesn't
So maybe
surprise me.
season 4.
Maybe.
Referee for...
Possibly.
I also may be DMing soon. I'm going to be dipping my toes in for the very first time in the campaign that we're doing with Phil. I'm running a one-shot
Whoop.
next week, actually. But on that, we'll see if I'm any good and if I have a thirst for it, and we'll go from there.
Thirst.
I think I don't know what you think, Chris, but I personally think it benefits people as players to DM.
Oh, totally. I think so.
Feel the horror at watching players ruin their creations.
I just want to say that the part of the reason we're doing this is episode 0. Episode 0 is designed to start a campaign. It's designed to start a chronicle, and you need to. I at least find that I want to know about my players' experiences. Want to know what they're anticipating for the game, what they want from their game, what they've brought to the game, and part of that is their role-playing experience. So we're not just talking about ourselves for no reason. It also helps, for me at least, build a game. But in that, let's go around and talk a little bit about our characters in a little more detail. Maybe a 2-sentence or 3-sentence summary. If we can achieve that. Let's go with Ellen. Yes, we're going the other way around.
So Isabelle Dumont is a very beautiful, stunning, kind of empathetic caregiver. She was a nun in training before she was embraced, and so she's the kind of person who she walks into a room and people kind of love her in many more ways than just one. Does that give you
That's a fair summary, I would say.
Yeah.
Sean, what about you?
So Kevin Morse is a former beat cop / former detective, recently embraced Bruges. He is not happy about it, to say the very least, and he has travelled from Melbourne all the way to Adelaide with the express purpose of achieving one particular goal, that as the hard-boiled, no-nonsense Australian Aussie bloke that he is, nothing will stop him from achieving that.
Absolutely. And Phil?
So Vincent Masters is a former college professor of literature who lost his academic career shortly before becoming embraced, and then found himself in a different kind of academic world in the Tremere, which has a very similar hierarchy. So he has fit himself right in, and he is really interested in growing ambition and securing his place in this new world, as he was in the old one. He really has tried to take it in his stride, and it's onwards and upwards for him.
It is funny to me that he thinks he has fit himself in.
Yes, that's right.
Rather than being selected and inserted into it.
Well, he probably knows that, but he's
I like
got a
to
bit of
think-
ego.
I think so.
I like that this whole vampire game boils down to you say something and then everyone goes, "Oh, honey."
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of
that's
that
cute.
is true.
I think he would also he would be able to spin that to massage his ego as well. It's like, I was selected because of course I was.
Yes.
Who wouldn't want me?
So, Sean, you touched on the
I hate
fact
this
that
guy.
your character is Australian.
Yes.
This game is set in Australia, in the city of Adelaide, which is where we record.
We're all Australian, by the way.
Yes, if this is your first episode,
I am not.
it is an interesting episode to pick.
How dare you?
Well, it's fair enough. But we are Australian. We're an Australian podcast crew, and we've set the game, the location in our world, in our city. The world of darkness is a dark reflection of the real world. So the shadows grow slightly darker and longer, and there are nasty things hiding in there. People's most evil or selfish interests come to the front first before their selfless ones.
Yeah.
So it's not a nice place.
It's also
The mortal world is more corrupt and
Absolutely.
oppressive.
And supernatural things exist.
It's
Yes.
also worth noting, if people aren't familiar with Adelaide, that Adelaide already has a kind of very weird dichotomy. It's also, like, it's known as two things, like the city of churches, but then also the murder capital of Australia. Not because of amount of murder. We don't actually have all that much, but
Just notorious murders.
we have quite a lot of strange murders or unsolved cases, like the Beaumont children disappearing. We have the Snowtown murders, the bodies in barrels incident. We have the Somerton man.
There's lots of murder.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have
in
a
this
lot
city.
of very
Lot of
strange
death.
things that are quite juxtaposed with the fact that this is quite a conservative town.
For listeners, the most important takeaway, and I'll get to this in episode 1 to give you a little more, but Adelaide is an isolated city in Australia, which is an isolated country. It's a relatively conservative place and is known as 3 things: the city of churches, the city of murders, and named after its founder, Colonel Light, the city of light.
I think for me, one thing that is really notable about Adelaide, that goes along with its conservatism, is its reputation for being a parochial town. That's, a product of its conservatism and its isolation, that it feels like often socially and sometimes technologically it is 20, 30 years in the past. Attitudes change slower, trends arrive here later, and I feel like that's something that's kind of enhanced by the world of darkness as well.
It's
Absolutely.
got very much like a small town feel
Yes.
to it.
Yeah.
I also remember hearing a while ago, and I've heard it a few times over the years, that Adelaide is the place where people come to die. So it is very
good
much like
for
a retirement.
retiring.
Yeah, it's a retirement city. There you go.
That was episode. There goes,
Adelaide,
that was
come here
episode
if you
1.
want to
Yeah.
die.
Or, yeah,
Well, you
die
cut-
through
just cut-
retirement or
just cut
murder.
this.
Yeah. One way or the other, you're dying.
I thought as well, we talked about this in the Cyberpunk episode 0, but just kind of our interests in the world of, like, not just Vampire the game, but vampires in general. Like, if there is any other media or things in that sort of world that we do enjoy. I mean, for me personally, when I started thinking about this question, it was what my favorite book of all time is, which is by a man named Christopher Golden, who's done a lot of Marvel comics, I think, as well. He's done a lot of graphic novels and such, but he did a book series called Of Saints and Sinners. And it's the first one was also titled that, Of Saints and Sinners. It's a 1995 novel that deals with the vampire world, and it gives it a very nice, dark twist on it, and it really leans on the religious God versus Satan kind of dynamic, and it uses a few historical figures. It does go downhill as the series progresses, but that first book just really captured me, and I really got engrossed into that world quick smart.
Ellen, what about you?
Well, I've always loved vampires as a fucking goth and tragic emo child. First thing that comes to my head is on My Chemical Romance's first album, I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love. There is a security warning on the disc that says, it's just kind of like a standard like FBI warning, don't replicate, whatever. But then the added thing at the end is that if you do this, Gerard Way will come to your house and suck your blood. And I thought, fuck yeah.
So everyone did it.
Burnt that CD 100 times, y'all.
Hang on. Wasn't one of your major influences for Cyberpunk also My Chemical Romance?
I didn't come here to be judged.
I'm not judging. I'm just pointing it out.
The point is, they're versatile.
Phil, don't at her.
Are they not versatile?
I wouldn't think of it.
Let's return the gaze to Phil. What about your vampire?
Here's the gaze.
Look, I'm going to level with you.
Yeah.
I'm really not into vampires.
No, I know this.
Rude.
We discussed this actually
discussed
before.
this
Is this why
on.
you did every World of Darkness
Yeah.
game except Vampire?
Yeah, that's right. I'm much more interested in things like changelings and the Fae. I've always, as quite like an optimistic, sunny person who has depression.
I find the two go hand in
Yeah,
hand.
they do. It's comedians and depression, right?
Am I right?
Am I right? Hey! I've never been that kind of drawn to the vampire mythos. And I think it went through a period of being kind of hitting the mainstream, and there was some kind of quite lame incarnations of
Are
it.
you here to talk shit about Twilight?
No.
Because if you won't, I will.
And I think that even maybe kind of alienated me further from the concept. I'm not totally like a snob about it or anything. I've watched Interview with a Vampire. I quite like Angel as a series. It's quite cool.
What's the Nicolas Cage film where he thinks he's a vampire?
Vampire Kiss?
Yeah,
Vampire
yeah.
Kiss. I haven't watched that. I
Neither
really
have I.
want to though.
What's he call it? The is it falsies? No, when he like
His
puts
teeth?
in the fake.
Yeah, I think
fangs.
it's his falsies.
It's
Yeah.
falsies.
Anyway,
So I don't have that kind of a deeper connection to it. That said, I really love the world and the system, and this version of vampires where they're not just ravenous beasts, they're not just monsters. They have a wrestle with humanity to take on, and drinking blood isn't about just decimating the population and just like killing whoever they want. They don't generally kill people when they drink from them. Humans kind of enjoy it as well. And this emphasis on the masquerade of them, instead of trying to like take over the world, they live in the shadows and they're in a tenuous, precarious position. Those are some of the best things about the vampire mythos for me is that when it reveals inner truths about being a human.
beings, yeah.
And that tension with humanity, I think, is the best thing to explore. So, especially getting into preparing for this game, has really shed a lot of the kind of internal stigma I had around vampires. I know I was really nervous at the beginning. I was like, am I going to be able to get into this in a way that is suitable? And I think I've achieved that, through both there being a really appealing kind of clan choice for me as well has really helped. But yeah, I'm coming at it as more of like an outsider, as someone who doesn't relate to the mythos that much.
Yeah.
I just quickly do my
I was gonna ask
RPG,
your-
my
Yeah.
RPG
your
history
history.
and my vampire history.
How much time do we have?
I
that's
have no
right.
idea. So I've been role-playing for 20 years. I started playing D&D 2nd edition by playing Baldur's Gate and reverse engineered the system out of that with some calculators and some inventions. I've been playing Vampire since 2004 with the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines video game.
Which the new one's coming out
yes.
next year.
Vampire Bloodlines Masquerade 2, baby.
Yeah.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see what that game's like. I've been a long time fan of the game, and I'm excited. I've also LARPed the game for a long time, so yeah.
It's
it'll be
also
fun.
worth noticing, just a little plug here. If you jump over to the Committee Quest podcast, our luscious, lustrous DM Chris sat down and had an interview which talks about his history role playing even further.
Yes,
and it's a really cool interview.
That's the quick summary. There is a Committee Quest chat with Chris, I think it is.
Yeah.
So let's chat about how your characters have arrived at the beginning of this story. So to quickly summarize, we played episode -0.
I love
a demo
it
game
so much.
which had Ellen and Phil's character taking the beginning of the story. It followed Phil, your character, Professor Masters, being released, which is his sire.
The Becoming.
Yes, the Becoming, which no longer is speaking for you. You are your own creature now.
And
there
you're
was some
responsible for your own actions.
there was some intrigue, some court intrigue, as what seemed to go down maybe wasn't planned, or maybe was slightly earlier than what normally would happen.
Yeah, there was a real sense of unease. There was something kind of off about the city's prince. That intrigued everyone. We're like, oh, okay. So he seems not up to scratch. He seems affected, or
something's on his mind,
hypnotized, or something.
Lost,
Absolutely. And Ellen, Isabella was in the audience, in the court, watching all of this.
Yep.
Before the two of you were summoned by the prince
himself.
to go with the sheriff,
Jack Bannon,
to a designated spot. You weren't told what would happen.
No, and the spot I believe was the
Peckish James.
Peckish James was the parking lot of a fast food
chain
on the border of the city's city district, as far as vampires are concerned.
Very weird summoning as well.
Yes.
You were just told that you were there to say hello to an incoming vampire.
Yeah,
which as a recent neonate and someone who's a bit older but not that much.
Not my month
kinda
or
weird.
two.
Quite an odd
You
request.
are both characters who have been vampires for less than a year.
Yeah.
Super young.
Under 8 months. So you're
Freshies.
incredibly young neonates.
It's an odd request.
And that night, screaming down the roads, came Kevin Bruja from Melbourne, who drove straight into the city at top speed, was almost T-boned by a car which seemed to have intent to harm him, and was then pursued by the sheriff and the two kindred.
Abruptly stopped.
Yes, that's right. You were taken to
My Haven.
It was
Haven?
Isabella's Haven.
Isabel's Haven
Norwood.
in Norwood, where you were taught about kindred. This chronicle will begin a month after that incident. So you've had time to acclimatize to the city of Adelaide, begin to set
and also
yourself
acclimatizing just to being a vampire.
That's
It's
right.
this new state of unbeing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Is it worth noting also as well that Kevin came roaring into the city with very little kind of idea of why he was there?
He was a fresh embrace, as in the night of.
before.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he didn't really know what had happened to
He
him.
didn't know he was a vampire. He just
Yes.
knew that he needed to be
Yeah.
in Adelaide, and he had the blood from his embrace on his clothing.
And drove
Yes.
6 hours through the night from Melbourne to Adelaide.
Emotions running high. It was very close to you
Thirsty.
being
which is
in
exactly why he frenzied.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. No, you did frenzy.
He
Yeah.
frenzied. Frenzied the fuck
the
out.
story begins with you three as a coterie. Kevin has been, and this is where I will ask you some questions, and you can discuss amongst yourselves how you want to begin your story. How much has Kevin been taught about kindred society? What are if you were to give us and Sean the bullet points of what he's been taught, what would you say they are?
So a basic rundown of
Bloodlines?
Yep, bloodlines,
Or
social
clans.
etiquette, who the clans are, who hears, what being a recently embraced kindred.
And the basics of
means.
what being a kindred means, as
Yeah.
in you drink blood, you can't go out in the sun.
Yep.
If you don't drink blood, you'll go into torpor and you'll never come out of it again.
Yeah.
And you have a ravening beast inside of you. You must try and keep
That
control.
must be controlled.
I think that's where you start, right? These are your dangers
Yeah.
and these are your needs.
Yeah.
This is the basics of your
And
new
the 6
life.
traditions, like what you
Yes.
cannot
I think-
and can do.
I think very early on, you want that first tradition of this must be.
Don't tell
the,
anyone.
The masquerade must be upheld.
I think for Vincent as well, being a real clan head,
stickler
for the rules. I think he would have impressed over several times what the masquerade is and why it's important and what the consequences are for breaking it. So I think that has been hammered home in that first month pretty solidly.
Can I add a provocation to that? Does that include what the Camarilla is?
That's what I was just about to ask.
And how important that is?
For Vincent, yes, I think so.
Great.
Because he's a believer in the Camarilla.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Camarilla and its structure and how that relates to Adelaide and how this is a structure that has existed for thousands of years. Good luck trying to shake it up. You might as well just get in line.
Just for listeners who might not be familiar with the vampire lore, what is the Camarilla?
The Camarilla is a structure of vampire society that has existed for a long time. And it is basically a way of bringing order to a world that would otherwise be very lawless and chaotic. And so it's extremely hierarchical and has many kind of rules that govern it.
And there are 7 vampire clans that are a part of the
Camarilla. And they work together to maintain the masquerade, which is the principle by which vampires keep their existence hidden.
So the masquerade is the thing that protects kindred from humanity and humanity from kindred by pretending that there are no such things.
Yes.
You didn't see... It's very Men in Black. You didn't see anything.
Yes.
You're realizing the world.
We are kind of like a host-parasite situation. If Vincent is kind of hammering home on the facts... I think Isabel would be kind of very attuned to Kevin's psychological state. What's he feeling? How can she kind of ease in? You know, it's kind of like here's who you are and here's the basics, right? The needs and the wants. And Isabel is kind of just gauging, not to be a psychologist, but how is that making you feel? You know, there is outreach amongst the kindred. You know, this is now becoming a coterie. We can depend, well, you can't trust anyone, but you need to have some sort of support at the same time. That kind of impression that there is avenues in which you can kind of reach out.
And you are one of those avenues.
Yes.
How do you help him through these stages? Do you take the role of a mother, or do you take the role of a counselor, of a confidant? Do you seek to be someone with wisdom that you're bestowing, or do you seek to kind of lower yourself down to his level and go, we're in this together?
Much more as a kind of almost counselor, kind of auxiliary, and using that to kind of impress her own ideas about, you know, redemption and you know, yes, we're damned, but to what extent? And you know, seeing that he's a bruiser, you know, when emotions run hot, they can be quite dangerous for everyone.
So your introduction is almost one of tempering and calming and soothing into the world rather than gearing you up for anything.
The way Vincent sees it is that this fledgling has been sort of handed over to us. Normally he would have a sire to be responsible for him. Instead, we've got 2 neonates who are barely responsible for themselves, as you say, co-parenting.
Have a baby bruiser.
And I think he's keenly aware that if he's in this kind of default fledgling status, his actions they come back to us. Yeah. In the same way that when we were fledglings, our actions came back to our sire. Anything Kevin does at this stage comes back to us. And that is pretty dangerous for us in terms of him being very new and us not having a lot of status in this world yet. So I think, as you say, parents, like we've both fallen into sort of a demagogue role, both to help Kevin, also to cover our own asses, because if he's not released, he's our problem.
And also, you yourselves are relatively friendless.
Yes.
Yes, you have the support of your clan, but you're one of the new ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot. And
in my clan, the higher up you are, the more powerful you are, directly correlating, yeah. I mean, it's true of most clans, but in Tremere, that's double down.
That's right. As new, you're more disposable. And as a Toreador...
It's quite cliquish, but also Toreadors are, to think of it in terms of a high school, like they're the popular kids, so there's a fuck ton of backstabbing, rumors. It's not... If you're not in, you are kind of treading on thin ice, because it's kind of like you're hot one day, not the other.
And how does Kevin deal with his new adoptive parents and his step
Mummy
into this
and Daddy?
world? Yes.
It's really interesting because if the Tremere are all about hierarchy and structure. The Bruges are just fucking chaos. Like and it's doubly so for Kevin. He's literally more so than a normal Bruges maybe would generally. He's just been thrown into the deep end, just going, let's see if you survive. Everyone's dusted their hands off of him, and he doesn't know what that is. So for Kevin, it's been this kind of this dichotomy of where like he is still pursuing his own goals, and he does have this very just tunnel vision towards what he wants to achieve, and that's why you have seen him over the month. He's gone onto the streets. He has tried to accumulate information, and
he's not just letting mum and dad bring him blood to feed on.
No, he's still going to be self-sufficient, and he's going to be using his time and his experiences as an investigator. He's not just going to sit idly by and just twiddle his thumbs.
Something that worries his two compatriots, I would imagine.
Getting out in the world,
we can't stop you necessarily, but be fucking careful, please.
But by the same token, whether this comes as a surprise or not to people, but he's been very kind of diligent in wanting to learn about vampire society, wanting to learn. So when they're saying, you know, every time Vincent comes and says, so this, and this, and, you know, Kevin be like, yep, sure. And he's got his little black book that he introduced in the demo that no one sees, but he's been writing things down. He's been diligent in learning, hearing from both mum and dad.
And a curious mind can betray other kind of wants.
Yeah.
Because Kevin's a former police officer,
yes.
Does he accept the kind of rules and laws that I assume Professor Masters instills by perhaps a curfew and begins to lessen the leash as time goes on? Or is it straight away, I'm your own person?
So Vincent might have set some restrictions on you early on, like, be back before this time, report into us everything that you've done so far, because you don't know what you're doing yet. And
or go with us before, like, we will go hunting together.
Yeah. Or are you like, okay, I'll earn their trust and get a bit more independence? Or are you like, fuck that?
You're going to find that Kevin did push things quite early, and there is a thing of, like, there is going to be instances where it's like, oh, like, you know, maybe instead of 9, he came in at 9:15, or he only went out for a half an hour apparently. Like, it's that thing. Yeah. He is immediately going to be pushing boundaries because he refuses to be beholden to people, even though he is respectful in a sense of, like, you'll get this notion that Kevin he's learning about society. He's trying to really understand how the culture works as much as he is being given. He's not just going to put the leash on his neck and say, yes, sir, yes, sir.
So everything. It's a bit of, I understand what you're doing by giving me these restrictions. However, I need to know their purpose because I'm a human grown man. Don't treat me like a child.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not going to be accepting of that. And not in a immediately overt fuck you sort of way.
Yeah.
But in a way of, I'm sorry, but there are things that I'm going to do and I'm not going to apologize for that.
Worth noting that Vincent is not a teacher of children. He's a teacher of grown-ups, right? He's a tertiary academic teacher. So the idea that he doesn't treat Kevin's education as a sort of like a condescending, you must do this. It's more of an adult learning situation. It's like, I'm going to give you the tools and I'm going to set you the responsibilities. And if you want to fuck that up, just don't drag me along with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to seek to control his every action.
Yeah.
But I will punish anything that jeopardizes me in my position.
Whereas for Isabel, it's like, well, I mean, it's all very tied in with Catholicism and the kind of guilt and the reconciliation of, you've done something wrong and that hurts me, but it's okay because I forgive you, and that kind of, like, I'm going to kind of talk through with you why this is a bad thing and why this can hurt people, but without the kind of thing of, like, you done fucked up.
Yeah.
It's an emotional manipulation.
Yeah, or
right?
this is
it's
a rule,
guilt trip.
or this is a rule that you've broken. It's kind of like, when you did this
you hurt me.
These are the consequences.
Why don't you get the knife?
Bad.
That's what you really want.
Yeah. And what's also interesting from Kevin's point of view is that reconciling kindred society with his own sense of what's good and what's just.
Sure.
Because he was brought up in the police force. He was brought up, you know, with this very clear sense of what's right and what's wrong. And now that's been
and you being the enforcer.
Yeah, and that's been completely flipped on his head. So while he still has this projected sense of he is still searching for the ultimate good, he's still struggling and learning and trying to comprehend what that means now in the world of darkness.
Lines that you thought previously were black and white are blurred and are now grey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's still searching and trying to at least...
Trying to find the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The bigger black and white. Absolutely. So what we will do is we'll do it in this episode before we begin, because I'd like to begin with action rather than me talking. Mm-hmm. In the month that has preceded your arrival, Kevin's arrival, and your kind of adoption, several things have happened. One, you've had to look after a baby bruiser. Two, Isabel.
Yes.
Kindred Society as a whole, the Camarilla at least, has almost instantly turned cold on you. Not just the Toreador, but most Kindred, particularly among Clan Venturi and Clan Tremere, you're often on the outside of conversations looking in.
Persona non grata.
Yeah. Has this been done very overtly or very surreptitiously?
It's quite overt.
So I know about it.
Oh, yeah. You have no idea why, but
You just know.
Same thing hasn't happened to me.
nope, you're still in.
me.
Maybe some Venturi have by association, you think, largely.
Yeah.
But you're not quite sure.
But my own clan's okay with me.
They seem to be. You are deeply worried if you suspect they would have acted on you if they seriously didn't trust you.
Yes.
You're not sure why this is the case.
Okay.
All you know is that before you were an unreleased child, things seemed wonderful. Mm-hmm. You were released. A few weeks went by. Professor Masters was released. His becoming. Suddenly people are not terribly interested in you.
Okay.
They avoid you.
Yep.
Kevin, you've begun to grow your confidence, your sense of your place within being a kindred, a vampire. You have learnt how to feed regularly. You can take care of yourself so much as you can with the support of these two. And they too have discovered, in a sense, that they need your support.
Yep.
The three of you have begun acting more and more
As a coterie.
as a coterie and in alignment with each other. You speak to each other. You consult with each other on different sorts of issues. Vincent, I've already given you the message from your sire and from the clan as a whole.
Mm-hmm. What message is that?
That was sent privately. You are ahead of the curve, as it were.
Oh.
What you do know is that
It's a game of secrets, people.
it is a bit. It is a bit. The clan that you have picked informs
Yes.
that. Yes, it is.
Sharing is caring.
What?
It's nothing you need to know. Just trust me.
My old LARP group would disappear with the Tremere going off and going, Tremere business, and we would just go, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
What you do know is that your position within Kindred Society is beginning to fray. You are considered slightly a bit of a liability because you don't seem to do anything.
All of us.
Yes.
All of us?
Yes. There are coteries out there who enforce the masquerade regularly with police contacts, with media contacts, who are spies for different groups and organizations that keep the government in line, who are investment bankers and that sort of... They own banks or companies. They have a function.
They have a purpose.
You three don't.
Then why were we put together?
And it seems like either people are waiting for you to assert that or your moment hasn't arrived just
Well, as long as I
yet.
have free time to study, I don't really mind, to be honest. If you don't have other shit clouding me, I can go and learn more magic.
Yes,
Yeah,
fine by me.
absolutely.
So I don't mind being idle in that way.
Now, just as a quick question, I have a few logistical things.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you sharing a haven as a coterie?
Well, look, I have a house in Prospect. Mm-hmm. You have a house in Norwood.
Yeah, a
You
little
don't
flat
have-
kind of thing.
Do you have a domain or haven?
I don't believe so, no.
No.
So one of us has to probably is putting him up, right?
Yeah, I would assume that would be me.
Yeah, I would assume I'd go
Sure.
with...
I
I
presume
thought you
your
would-
sort of character would.
Yeah, I would think you would be a bit more.
I can imagine spending time there.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and basically having coterie meetings there. But I would still maintain my own place, especially as I'm a Tremere and
Yeah.
I love secrets and my studies are not
You've
for
gotta
other
have your
people to
own.
look into. So I need my own place. And I would be very happy to have your place as a meeting place because it means no one ever has to visit me
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
come
yeah.
to my house,
I feel
which
that
has
the
got
second,
my things in
the
it.
second Isabella was like, well, I'll take him in, you're like, oh, thank God.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
That's good.
Maybe
Yeah,
you even
correct.
suggest it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got more space. I can't actually.
Yeah.
It's
a mess. There's
It's hard.
books everywhere.
I don't
This
have
is
any
more
space
inviting
for
for
him.
another person.
A mess
Yeah.
is
My
not
landlord is-
becoming.
The landlord is can be difficult. I mean, outside of domination, but yeah.
Has any of your coterie ever been to your haven then?
No.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
I would avoid that happening if I could. I wouldn't. I probably would try to avoid making it like an explicit, like, no one ever comes here. I would just try and arrange it so that it's more convenient to be
Absolutely.
elsewhere.
Yeah. Now, I just want to formalize the relationships between the characters. So in maybe two sentences, can you, Phil, describe your relationship with Kevin and then Isabella?
Kevin is a fast learner and a good student. That earns my respect. But he's also lacks a bit of self-discipline, and so I'm worried about him becoming a liability to me.
Right.
So mixed, good and bad. Isabel, I started thinking of her as quite vapid and kind of useless. But on first meeting, I was like, really, am I being stuck with this person? And then it's sort of become a grudging regard. I think particularly spending time around her and being like, oh, well, the things that the aesthetic things that she loves are things like literature. There is a connection there that I've felt with her, and her wisdom for things that I don't have a great regard for, such as the inner emotional world. I recognize that she has skills in that regard, especially when it comes to Kevin that I don't. And I'm like, okay, you're not so useless after all. That's
Right.
my relationship to her. Yeah.
Isabella?
Yes. I think that Vincent has kind of too many secrets, is kind of playing his own game. That's not for the good of this coterie, but I do respect heavily the position that someone with great knowledge and information and a thirst for kind of personal study has. So I kind of respect him, even though I think his desire for withholding secrets is a bit destructive. With Kevin, I'm kind of very invested in cultivating him as his kind of own being, and kind of giving him the support. I believe all good missions need inquisitors and kind of strength, and I believe that if he can be fostered well, he can kind of have strength, but the morals to kind of guide that.
And
Kevin's view of Vincent, it kind of falls along the same lines as that. He finds him he's been a wealth of information, and especially in being able to formulate his view on kindred society and how to act within that society, but he can't really trust him. He can't really trust him as far as he can throw him. He dealt in.
Hey, you could throw me pretty far.
Yeah,
and you can't even trust him that much.
he lived in a world when he was alive in a place where it is his job to bring out secrets and to find who he can trust and who he can't, and to have someone that is so entrenched in his unlife now being someone trustworthy. He knows he has to keep him at a certain length.
Yep.
And for Isabella, it's very much, Isabella reminds him of his mother back in Melbourne. And it's someone that he is developing a trust for. He may feel that she is a bit more idealistic than he feels he can be within this society, but he values what Isabella is trying to instill in him. He can see the dichotomy between the way they're approaching things, and he at least sees it as an aspect of kindred society that he hasn't got a full grasp on yet, that emotional response to his new life. He can understand the pragmatic approach, whereas these are the rules, this is what you have to do, but that whole thing of, how do I feel? Well, a lot of times fucking pissed off. But how he understands that and puts that to use is kind of interesting.
I help protect you from making overt mistakes,
Yeah.
and she helps keep your humanity intact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Good parenting.
That's where I want to leave episode 0.
Pre this, we sort of we were sort of discussing, and you said you might bring it up here about whether we had formally presented Kevin.
Oh, I presume you have.
Yes,
Okay.
because I
Did
would
you-
have thought
did you-
that would happen because it's super dangerous not to.
Yes.
It's very,
Yeah.
very, very against etiquette
Totally.
to not have him.
Well, it's the fifth tradition. It's like
You must-
I have come into someone else's domain. I must present myself
Yes.
to the prince.
Yes.
So we would have presented him to the prince.
I presume
in
so, yeah.
private, I imagine.
Yeah.
Public or private?
Yeah.
Whatever you decide. Which would you prefer?
Probably private.
I would have
Yeah,
Especially-
because
private?
publicly that puts us. That makes it's just like, hey, look at us. Look how weird this
Yeah,
is.
and also it started from a weird place of
Yes.
the prince asking us to go there anyway. So
Quietly.
He brought you aside and said, "Do this thing."
so it's
the-
kind of like is this what you wanted to say?
So the prince would have met him in private and then publicly announced him.
Yes.
So that other kindred don't see you and go,
Who
who
the
are
fuck
you?
are you?
Who's
Yeah.
this guy?
Time to kill you
Yeah.
and bring you, or stake you and bring you to the prince.
Would
Yeah.
he also have gone, if this guy does any fuck ups, look up Vincent and Isabel. They're
Not
responsible for him.
Explicitly, but
Yeah,
potentially
everybody knows it.
implied.
But everyone's
Yeah.
Yeah,
everyone's
well, everyone
talking.
is thinking it.
Yeah.
They're going, what are these two neonates doing, bringing another neonate to the city? Where did they get this kid from?
Yeah.
Where did they get this kid from?
Why do they have
Why?
this?
Whose decision was that?
Whose Bruja is this?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Good question.
Until that time, until the next episode, good night from all of us at Baby Beard Media at Roll to Cast.
Should I say it? Bonne nuit.
Bon nuit.
to your own.
Good night there, folks.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
This just turned into...
Adelaide by Night is a Baby Beard Media production. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And all our podcasts are available on Spreaker, YouTube, and all good podcatchers. Portions of the materials are the copyrights and trademarks of White Wolf Entertainment AB and are used with permission. All rights reserved. For more information, please visit white-wolf.com. This season of Roll to Cast is made by fans, for fans, and is not officially licensed material of White Wolf Entertainment.